Welcome to the Unwritten Life Podcast, where we share that your deepest pain can lead to your biggest gain, and that your story is still unwritten. Now introducing your host, Tim Sawhook.
Welcome to the show today, everybody. So excited to have you on board with me for another episode of the Unwritten Life Podcast. Again, I am your host, Tim Sawhook, and I am blessed to have you guys with me today. If you're in need of hope and encouragement, you have come to the right place. We have an awesome interview for you today. It is very raw, it is very powerful, and it's really going to touch some lives out there today. So I want to put that out there at the beginning. But before we get into all of that, we have to have some thank yous. Thank you to everybody who's been listening. Really appreciate it. Last week we had a lot of downloads, a lot of conversation going on, and people really connected to Katie Bryant's story. Not so much that, everybody like, oh, great story, great podcast. I was getting messages saying, this really touched me. I could really feel her power of her story. I'm now listening to it for the second and third time. I've passed it on to other people to listen to, and that is amazing. That means all of you are part of the Unwritten Life family, and you are spreading that message of hope and sharing that inspiration with others. And that's what the whole purpose of the podcast is to let hope be a revolution in people's lives, and that it spreads like that, like wildfire. And you guys are doing that. So thank you very much, and congratulations to you for doing that. That means you are impacting lives as well. Also, don't forget, we are going to have some bonus episodes coming up. I talked about it last week briefly. There's going to be a segment called Ask the Coach. It's going to be a life coach. And right now, some people are like, I hear these stories of people who have been through it, and now they've come through on the other side with success and maybe some hope and maybe some direction in their life. And how do I get that? Where do I stand in the unwritten life? How do I achieve that? How do I attain that? Well, we're going to have a segment on where we're going to give practical ideas and tips on how to achieve that unwritten life, how to get to that next step. And leading up to that, I'm going to be asking questions of you guys. I want to know your questions that you have. I'm stuck. Where do I need to go? Things of that nature. And we're going to answer those on the air. And hopefully it's going to touch lives, and it's really going to add value to your day. Before we get to the show today, here's a quick word from our sponsors.
Are you ready to pack your bags and get away? Let Exclusive Travel Partners help you plan the perfect vacation. From all-inclusives on the beach to your own European vacation or taking the family to Disney World, we are here to match the perfect vacation to your needs and budget. And best of all, our service is always free. Contact us at exclusivetravelpartners.com. Mention code UNWRITTEN for a $25 travel credit to use on your next vacation with us. At Exclusive Travel Partners, you are always the VIP.
Well, like I promised at the top of the show, we have another amazing episode. I've had the privilege of meeting our guest today. Her name is Jessie Richardson. She is a personal trainer. She is a wife. She is a survivor. And she is an overall badass. Here is my conversation with Jessie Richardson. Well, I'd like to welcome to the show today, Jessie Richardson. How are you doing today, Jessie?
Oh, I'm so good. Today's been a great day.
Good. I'm so happy that you agreed to come on and tell your story and share it with people. So Jessie has a very powerful story, and I think it's really going to impact a lot of people's lives, and we're going to give some awareness to some things that are really going on out there. But before we get into that, like I do with all my guests, I want to know from the beginning. Let's start from the beginning. What was it like growing up for you, Jessie?
I think I had a pretty normal childhood. I had a sister, and she was almost the same age as me, 14 months apart, in fact. She was she was the athletic one. She was the stable one, I guess you would say. And we were pretty inseparable for a long time. My mom owned her own business. She made pillows for a living, and you'll come to find this later. But now I'm an entrepreneur, and I think that's a part of who I am, and I think my mom helped to build that.
That's cool.
Do what?
So that's cool.
Yeah, it is cool. It is cool. And my dad worked full-time, corporate America. Mm-hmm. He's an engineer, brilliant though. And, my dad actually, he grew up in a boys' home, and he didn't have his parents. And, I think that he worked really hard to give us the life that, you could only really, like, I really felt like when I was like 5, I was like, we're rich. Like, we weren't rich. At the time, we had this brand new house, and, it was this, it was this place in our world where I was like, wow, we're really well off, and we have this really wonderful life. And, I think it's just what you imagine. It's you're playing in the summertime in the pool with your sister, and then you have to go to school, and everybody hates going to school, and then you get home from school, and it's the whole 9 yards, And so that's kind of where my world started, and it was nothing special. Maybe it was special to me, but it was just like a childhood, and it was a great childhood, and I had great parents.
Where did you grow up at?
At Keller, Texas. Actually, I started off in North Richland Hills, Texas. I was born there, and then we moved at the age of 5 to Keller, Texas, which is where I live now.
All right, so you stayed in Texas. All right. So Texas girl.
A little bit, but I came back.
All right, so Texas girl at heart. You stayed there. You left, came back. All right. So as you're growing up and stuff, where does your story start to evolve a little bit as a young girl?
Yeah, it's so interesting. I think my story started to really evolve when I was about 9. We went on vacation, and it was a normal family vacation. We went to the beach. We're staying in this like condo, and I felt I had this moment. I was playing with my sister, and I had this moment, and it's like a brain, something happened in my brain, and things kind of switched. And in that moment, I developed, for the first time ever, mental illness. And people, sometimes people say that they were born with it, and then, but I don't think I was born with it. I think that, something in an instant in my body turned, and nothing happened to me to make this happen. But something just turned inside of my brain, and I can remember the instance, and I can remember the moment. And, I was never the same from that point forward. And it triggered a series of changes in my life. And I developed severe OCD, which over time developed into severe separation anxiety, and severe sleep insomnia, and severe depression. And that started at 9. And, this is many years ago, many moons ago. This is in the 90s. Right. And people didn't really, if there were words for these things, they didn't talk about them back then. It wasn't like, you're a child having problems, take them to counseling. That wasn't back then, And so that's really where things started to turn for me.
So as a young girl, age 9, you have this switch in your mind, and you're starting to feel differently, and you're not sure what's happening. What is young Jessie feeling at this point? What did you feel like? Did you feel like I did something wrong, something bad's happening in my body? What was going on? Yeah,
so this part's one of the hardest parts to tell, but it was this weird moment where all of a sudden I felt like I was hearing voices, and I can't, there's no other way to explain it than that. Now, did I physically hear voices? No, but I felt a presence, and it was speaking to me. Mm-hmm. And at 9 years old, I had not been taught about sex. I had never been abused. To my knowledge, I guess, but I've never been abused. And this voice was basically telling me that I had to have sex at 9 years old. And I didn't even know what sex was. And I remember when I had this like meltdown, and I'm sitting there with my mom, and I'm trying to explain to her, and I'm, at 9 years old, you're scared to even have that conversation with your mom. Right. Say. And I explained to her what I was feeling, and she tried her hardest to understand, but she doesn't know what's going on. And ultimately, she thought maybe I was having like a bladder infection. And so we sat on the toilet, and I was panicking, and I'm having this voice, and this thing happened to me. And I have no tools at all to understand even how to, at 9, to even handle this situation. And again, I still don't even know what sex is. I remember her asking me specifically, what is sex to you? And I didn't even have an answer. And so it's a very weird thing, but I was definitely having feelings. And it was very scary feelings. And so anyway, she sat me down the toilet thinking maybe it was a bladder infection.
Right.
And she told me, I remember that she said, sweetie, your heart and your mind control your body. And what's crazy is that carried with me for the duration of my experience. And I would have this panic attack, and I'm sitting here having this panic attack, and I would just rock. And that's all I could do. I just rock, and I would say, your heart and your mind control your body. And I would sit there and I'd hold myself and I would rock, and she would sit there on the floor, and she just sat there, and I just kept repeating it. And I kept repeating it, and I kept repeating it until I was calm enough to sleep. And then she put me to bed, and we ended up, I think, ending that vacation early, I feel like. And I know we were driving home, and we had to stop like every 30 minutes because I had to stop and get on the toilet, and I had to rock, and I had to say this mantra. And I did it the whole way home. And it became a part of me. That mantra became a part of me. And it developed into other things. There was a point in my time in in these years that, the voices started to tell me that I was going to kill somebody. And it was very real. And I couldn't walk. There was a drawer in our kitchen, the knives were. And then it was that I was going to kill, mainly my mom. I was going to kill my mom with the knife, and I wasn't going to be able to control that. And I couldn't walk past that point in the kitchen without the mantra. And every time I saw a knife, I had to say the mantra. And if my mom would take naps on the couch, and that's when it would be most vivid to me. And I would have these voices because I'm awake and she's asleep, and it's opportunistic, and it's a voice, and it's telling me it's going to happen, and it's going to happen whether I want it to happen or not. And I would sit in the corner of my room, and I would rock, and I would say, your heart and your mind control your body, your heart and your mind control your body. And I would rock until the voices went away. It's weird.
I mean, does it sound weird? Yeah, it does. Definitely sounds a little strange, because nobody can fathom what that's like. No one can fathom being at that young age, having these very big imprinted feelings on our minds, hearing those voices. These are severe things. At 9 years old, you're thinking, I need to have sex, not even knowing what that is, not even having the language to convey that to your mom when she asks that. You're not emotionally ready to discuss that as a 9-year-old. And then also have these feelings later on that you were going to kill your mom, and having to have that chant over and over again. When you guys got back home, what was your parents' role in this? Did they take you to doctors? Did they say, we need to find out this, that, and the other? What happened?
Yeah, so they took me to a regular doctor to check for a bladder infection. That's the only doctor I went to. Back then it wasn't a thing, to take you to a counselor or a psychiatrist. And I think, specifically in my family's world, it wasn't a thing. We didn't talk about that. Nobody in our family had gone to a counselor. Nobody had gotten help. And, I think like the biggest thing is that my mom, she was there, and man, she didn't stop, man. She stayed right there. In fact, she changed her whole life. She stopped sleeping in the bed with my dad, and she started sleeping in the bed with me. So that if I had a panic attack or an outbreak, she would be there. And then, my dad, what unfortunately happened is I fell really far away from my dad, and my dad fell really far away from my mom. And my sister and my dad, they got really close, but my mom and my sister fell really far apart. And so this was a pretty pivotal thing, because it really destroyed my family. And you don't know it, until you're older, and you can look back as a married woman and say that that's what happened.
Right.
And it's what happened. And, my mom wouldn't take it back for the world.
But you know what? That time your mom made a choice for you, and that wasn't a choice that you made. You were a young girl who needed help. You were struggling on levels that a lot of people can't understand or even recognize. And your mom made a choice. Did things happen because of that choice? Yes. But as a parent, I am today, I would do anything for my kids, and I would make that choice, and if things got strained on the other end, I'd have to deal with that later. But I would make that choice to be there for my kids, and your mom did that. So that's not on you, Jessie. Yeah. And I understand that now as an adult, you see that, and you see how these things divided, and point A leads to point B, but that's not your fault. Yeah. But I understand as a person who has all the feelings and has a heart, that it would look that way. And it must have been harder even as a young girl seeing that happen. Maybe not knowing what was going to look like down the road, but to see that things are a little bit different between mom and dad now. That happy life you talked about at the beginning, where we felt rich and on top of the world, you could feel a change in the family. Is that right?
Yeah, there was an absolute shift. And in me and my sister too, we fell apart. And I can look back now and I can see why that happened. And she needed attention and she was striving for that. And I couldn't even be in another room without having a panic attack. I had to be within a certain, like, couple of feet or voice distance from my mom. And if I couldn't hear her, I would panic. And, there's a lot of things that go into that, but I think, ultimately, I wish my parents had more tools back then.
Right.
I wish they would have known that they could have taken me to a psychiatrist. I wish that they could have known that, but they couldn't have, and they didn't. And, I think, one tip I have for parents now, if you see something, say something. If you see something, take them. What's the worst that could happen? They don't talk to them and you're the same place that you are. You never
Right.
know. You just try. You don't know. And I would do anything to be able to go back and have somebody help me through this, for sure. Not the way that my mom could. My mom was amazing, but
Right.
I needed way more help than that. It got to the point where, I was washing my hands and my hands would bleed because I was washing them so much. And I was washing my hair so much that it would, I don't know if you know this, but if you wash your hair a lot, your hair actually gets oilier. And so I couldn't go 3 hours without washing my hair because my hair kept getting oilier because I was washing it. I had to shower every time I touched something that felt a little dirty or that might have been dirty at one point. I would shower. So I was showering 5 or 6 times a day. And so it was causing a ton of, well, first of all, I broke out with massive acne, and I also had OCD, so then I would pick the acne, and so then I had craters on my face, and I had craters on my body because I was picking, and it was all OCD, and all these things, they're all weighing together, and it's the washing that's making my skin break out because there's not enough natural oils, and there's just all these crazy things that you don't realize are happening. But if you had been prepped with the tools, and I wish my parents had anybody there to help them through this, to be prepped with those tools, they would have known what was going on. I was being treated for things individually. I was being treated for my OC. I had ADD and OCD, so I was being treated for my ADD, and then I was being treated for my acne. But the psychological issues underlying, there was no psychiatrist there to guide that.
Right. So growing up at this point, what age are you when this is happening?
I'm somewhere between, well, I know it was 5th grade when the hand washing happened. And just for the audience to know, I have not talked to my family about this. Besides my sister, I have not talked to my family about this. I don't have a chronological timeline because where my family is now, it's not a healthy place for us to be able to talk about this. But I know it's somewhere between 5th grade and me being 12 years old and 7th grade. So somewhere in the 2-year gap.
So during that time frame when this all started on that vacation leading up to the severe OCD and the things that you're going through, just to be right for the audience, you didn't have any kind of support, counselor, psychiatrist, any of that?
No, I didn't have any of that. My mom was a godsend, but she's the only one I had.
So she really took on a huge burden then, because she was everything to you.
Everything.
Were you able to go to school?
That was one of the hardest things. I would go to school. Well, my dad was very good. He got her a cell phone. My dad, he didn't handle this well, and he didn't know how to. And so he got her a cell phone, which was the only way he knew how to support me. And so I would have panic attacks if I couldn't reach her. But obviously back then it was landlines. Cell phones had just come out. And so he got her one, which obviously was a big financial burden on us. But I went home from school, or I shouldn't say go home from school. If I couldn't get a hold of mom, I ended up going home from school because of a panic attack. But every single day I went to the nurse's office and I would say that my stomach hurt and they would let me call my mom. And if I got a hold of her, I could finish out class. And if she was at home, I could finish out class. But if she had to drive anywhere, if she told me she had to run to the grocery store, I would have a panic attack and she would have to come pick me up and we'd have to go to the grocery store together. And then she could drop me back off. And I went to work with her too. So she worked from home during the week, but on the weekends she went and sold at a flea market off Henderson Street in Fort Worth. And so I spent my weekends with her at Henderson Street in Fort Worth selling pillows because I couldn't be away from her that long.
That's tough. I mean, you're going to work with your mom. Your mom, see, the aspect that I was thinking of is your mom probably didn't have much of a life because she would. Now, I mean, I'd say our kids are our lives, but I mean, just as far as having any kind of personal space or anything for herself, you were there, you needed her all the time, and she was all in on that.
All in. She never once questioned it. There was a few times I remember, and now as a grown woman, I can look back and I can say that's what she was trying to do. She needed space. And she would lock the door when she went to the bathroom, and it was because she needed space. But I would sit outside the bathroom door and I would wait, because I felt like if I stepped on a crack in the house, or if I walked outside, she was going to die.
Yeah, and that's a tough burden for you to bear, because you're when you have the mental illness of that extent, there's no real reason.
There's no reason.
There's no reason. None of the things that you're going through are really based in reality, but they are very real to you. Yeah. If anyone's heard my story, I've been there before. I've heard those voices. I've been things like that are dark, and to you it feels so real that it's going on, and it is real, and that's your experience. But for anybody else who's seeing that, there's no real, like, obviously if I step on a crack, my mom's not going to die. But to you felt that, and that was very scary to you, especially being a young girl.
Yeah.
With you being in and out of school and stuff, how did that impact you socially growing up?
I only had one friend. She was wonderful, and she's still my best friend today. Her name's Stacy, and
give Stacy a big shout out.
Stacy's amazing. 26 years now. We were best friends.
That's awesome.
She really stuck it out with me. I would try to stay the night at her house, and I would have a panic attack, and my mom would come get me, and I got to a point where I couldn't go really even over to her house at all because of the disorder, and she would come to my house anyway. And there was a time where her mom wouldn't let her come to my house because I wouldn't go to her house, but she didn't understand what I was going through. And over time, because Stacy loved me so much, she would push, and her mom would finally let her come over. But all of my friendships and all of my relationships, they only happened if they happened at my house. And Stacy was really the only one I had until I was in 7th grade. She was kind of my go-to light. And we started our friendship in kindergarten. And so, there's many years of it. And so she was with me the whole way, and she still is today. I mean, we can go back and talk about some of those things now, and she's one of the few people that remembers those terrible times.
Right.
She went with me to my mom's work at the flea market, which is a dirty, 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 nasty place. She went with me because I wanted her there, but I had to be with my mom, and so she was really wonderful.
That's amazing. You have that friend then and still now today who stood with you during that time. Let me ask you about like a different aspect of this. So we said that, your mom probably felt very isolated. Did you feel like you were your family's dirty little secret? Like nobody knew what was going on outside the walls of your home and the school? I
didn't, we weren't super close. My dad didn't know his family. And then my mom's dad died when she was young, and I had my grandparents. But I think at the time, I felt like my own dirty secret. I felt like I couldn't tell anybody what I was going through because they were going to send me to an insane asylum. And that was my constant fear, is if anybody found out. And so I never felt like I was my family's dirty secret. I felt like I was constantly even keeping it sometimes from my family. Like I was keeping it from my sister. My sister had no real concept of what was happening, and we never talked about it at that time. Like at that time, she didn't know about the voices. She didn't know about any of that. So I was kind of my own, like my family's own, like in my mind, I was our dirty secret. And it was probably only, like, I didn't even think about everyone else and what they think of me. I only thought about, like, I got to keep this from even my sister and even my dad. And I got to keep it as far away as I can. And if they have to see little bits of it, that's okay, but they don't have to know the source.
Well, the reason I was asking, and I would have a follow-up question to that, with your parents have their own kind of separation going through this and being isolated because, your mom's spending all this time with you. How would you say to anybody who's going through that to be able to contact, let's say, your mom in this situation, who sees that something severely is going wrong with their daughter? She obviously has got some things going on and she feels isolated. How can someone reach out to that person?
That's such a great question. I wish somebody had, and I pray that now it's more common to go to a counselor, but I wish somebody had told my family that, there's something wrong. And I think my biggest thing, and that's something I'm kind of living by, is if you see something, say something, even if it's painful, because they're burying something, and they're burying it, and they're burying it, and eventually it is going to come out, and it's going to come out, and it could be too far gone. And ours was too far gone, and the marriage ended, and our family ended. And it ended in fire. It didn't end soft and slow and calm. It ended in fire. And I think, I wish somebody had been there for my dad to help him through this. And I wish somebody had been there for my mom to help her through this. And ultimately, just transparency. My family I didn't realize it at the time, but, my family, my mom and dad, they didn't have an emotional connection like they should have anyway. And so that made it even worse. And so I think for me, like especially, with me and my husband now, I pray that I have people in my life that they will see something's not right, and they will be brave enough to say something, because ultimately we all need people. And I think if you know somebody and you're sitting there thinking, oh my gosh, I wonder if this is what they're going through, take them to coffee and tell them you care about them, and ask them if something's going on, and tell them this is private. You can keep it between you and me, but I am here to help. And give them an outlet, because they need it. They need it. And if you ever think that there's mental illness in the family, you've got to tell them to get help, because I don't care who you are. I don't care who you are. You need a doctor. If you are mentally ill, you need a doctor. It does not fix itself. You will try to fix it. People will try to fix you. It doesn't fix itself. You have to go get help. You have to go get medical help.
No, I think that's very well said. People know my platform. Mental health is a big thing for me, especially mental health awareness and talking about it. Being sick in your head is no different than being sick anywhere else in your body, and you shouldn't be ashamed of that. It's just a different kind of sickness. And mental health touches everybody. And I wanted to use this analogy on my podcast, and I didn't do it. I wanted people to picture sitting down at a dinner table with everybody, and you have all the fancy cups and plates and napkins there, and someone spills their cup, and the water spills all over the table and touches everything. That is mental illness in a family. It touches everybody. And there's everybody who knows somebody who's been touched by it. And you know what? If you spill water on a table and it touches you, you don't try to hide and just take the table out and throw it in the garbage. You talk about it and you deal with it. And I want you guys to know, if you've been touched by that, it's okay. Talk about it. Just like Jessie said, people don't want to feel isolated. I don't mean to get on the soapbox about mental illness, but it's a big deal. And I think it's important to say mental illness is okay.
I agree.
I want to be just as simple as saying I broke my arm. It's okay. People wouldn't judge you for a broken arm, and they shouldn't judge you for mental illness either. So as you're growing up, and then you see your family splitting apart, and you really don't have any connection or relationship with your dad, how did that impact you as far as relationships with younger boys and men? Were you seeking attention that you didn't get because you didn't have that anymore?
I absolutely did. And it's interesting. So I told you that as quickly as like that switch turned in my brain that this illness like occurred, it also turned off. Not the OCD, but the depression and the voices. Those turned off, and it happened. I was 12, and it was overnight. My mom was sleeping in my bed with me one night, and the very next night, I couldn't have her even put her hand on me. So I want to bring out one more thing to this. I wish I had tools, and I wish my mom had tools, because I can't imagine how painful that must have been for her to go from having to hold my hand every single moment of every single hour to all of a sudden she would touch me and I would freak out. I would freak out. And that is something that I think a lot of people probably go through, and they don't even realize that it's happening. And they don't realize that that's still the mental illness. I was still sick. And so my everything switched for me. I couldn't have her touch me, and that was the OCD. And so everything just turned. It went from one end to the next end. And I think, over a course of this period of time, my sister, she's developing, and she's becoming this beautiful, beautiful blonde, like bombshell of a woman. And she's becoming this, this incredibly athletic and incredibly smart girl. And meanwhile, like I'm in this like very broken place, and she kept getting like these accolades, and I kept like hiding in the shadows, and then I would try to follow her, because I was like, okay, I can do that. I can be her. I can do that thing that she's doing, and I would try, and I would never succeed at it. And all the while, my sister's pulled so far away from me, and I feel so alone.
Mm-hmm.
And you don't have any real place to go in this period, and you don't really know where to be and where to go. I think for me, like I started to, I found Jesus first off. That was a really powerful thing. And the story to finding Jesus is a long one because, there's no Christianity in my family. We did not grow up Christian.
Mm-hmm.
So how I found Jesus is a whole nother podcast, but I found Jesus, and, it was interesting. I was very misguided, and I got better enough. I got better enough to feel like I could help other people. And I found myself reaching out to people that I think were broken,
mm-hmm.
And that I could save. And that is so crazy to me looking back now, because it's so misguided, and it's so broken. And I, my parents were separating, and, I don't think that they were in a place to even be able to, like, nobody felt like they could say, this isn't right and we're going to stop it, because they were trying so hard just to not push us kids away further. That's what they were trying so hard not to do. And ultimately what ended up happening is my first, I went into high school. I'm 14, and I'm dating, and I had some good relationships, fun relationships you have in high school, just normal relationships. And I went from that into a really bad one. And I think, like, this really bad one, it all stems from insecurity. I think that's the only reason you do those things, insecurity. And I can't say that for sure, but I can definitely say that, I fell into a bad relationship that if you looking at it from the outside, you would see it and you would say, this is not right and this is not good, but I didn't see that.
Right.
And that's wild to me that I could see that. He was older. I was 15 when we started dating. I think I might have been. I was 15 when we started dating. He was 18, and I think I just turned 15. And I'm dating this guy, and I end up losing my virginity to this guy, and it's a weird thing because, you think you're so close to somebody, and then things start to fall apart, and you do everything you can. I think sex is such a scary thing because it makes people feel like they should fight, women specifically feel like they should fight really hard to maintain a relationship regardless of its health. And that's pretty much what happened. I lost my virginity to this guy, and everything changed. And he became very possessive. Mm-hmm. And it started verbal. He would tell me things like, you don't need to wear that to school, and you don't need to put makeup on. I used to dress very cute for school. Mm-hmm. And he would tell me that I didn't need to do these things. And then, if I continued to do them, eventually he would tell me that he feels like I'm doing them because I want to impress other men, other guys.
Right. And
so, you're like, well, I don't want you to feel this way. And so you start to change your behavior, and you stop wearing makeup, and you start wearing sweatpants to school. And then all of a sudden he doesn't want you hanging out with certain people, mm-hmm. and you love this person. So you're like, you know what? Okay, well, I won't hang out with this person. But first what they do is they just invite you over every single day, and they start to fill your time. And
right.
When you start to hang out with other people, they blame you. They blame you because you don't care enough about them to want to spend that moment with them. Mm-hmm. And there's no healthy boundaries at all. And, with in this situation, we got to a place where he started, I remember a specific moment where I realized things are really broken, and we were out at my horse barn. I had horses, and we were cleaning out the stalls, and he, somehow we got into some topic that he told me that my sister was a whore and my mom was a whore and that I was nothing but a whore. And he pinned me with his hand against my throat against the barn door. And I don't really remember how I came down from that. I don't remember where we went from there. I was 15 years old, and I was in love with an older guy, and
right.
We're in this place, and I'm a fighter, man. And I mean, I'm sure I would not have let him do that. So I'm sure that when he let me down or whatever, I probably slapped him. I don't even know, which obviously is not healthy, but I'm sure I did.
Well, you were fighting. You were fighting for yourself. So that's, it's okay. It'd be different if you were just going around slapping people in the face.
Right.
That's a different story. If you're protecting yourself, that's okay. Let me ask you a question real quick.
Yeah.
Because you're telling me how things are getting bad. When it first started, and you talked about you had just you'd really found God, and you were out there trying to save people, but you didn't have value for yourself. It doesn't sound like you felt like you were worth saving at this point. Is that what led to being so vulnerable and being open to something like this?
I'm sure it is. I know that for me, I was pouring into a particular woman at this time, and she was helping me in so many ways. And I don't know exactly what happened, and it's embarrassing for me to say this, but I think that I clinged onto her so tight that at some point she had to put a boundary up, kind of like I did with my mom, and she had to put a boundary up. And when I lost her is when I lost my value, I think. And right after that is when this situation happened with this guy. And so I think I was finding my value in people. I was finding my value and my love in people. And I didn't really have it of my own. I didn't feel like I belonged anywhere, and I didn't have anyone.
Well, what we've talked about already in the podcast is you went from being in a school where you only had one friend, and now you're starting to develop as a young woman to get that attention from somebody, especially a male and an older male. When you lost out on your dad, that must have been a good feeling for you. Because if you go from just having one friend that you could barely have a sleepover with to getting attention from boys, who's not going to feel better about that, right?
100%. Yeah, I'm sure. Yeah, it makes sense now.
Yeah, absolutely. So I don't want to put up anything on this podcast saying that anybody who gets in a relationship, it's their fault. It's not your fault, but I just wanted to, for your story, I can see it kind of unfolding, going from, all these different things. I don't have any value to someone loves me and they really want me and they want me all the time. What's wrong with that? And then things start to develop, getting a little worse for you. Is that right?
Yeah. And I think too, whether he meant it or didn't mean it, he would talk to me about some of his emotional troubles and turmoils. And I think that made me feel normal, made me feel like I can help because I've done that and I've been there.
Right.
I can help you, and I think that, I don't know if that was manipulative or not. Looking back now, I feel like it was. But now I also, as a grown woman, I could say, maybe he was really sick. I could go both directions with this. And I try not to judge because ultimately, well, you'll hear the rest of my story. And I think ultimately he was sick. You don't go down this path if you're not, or maybe he learned it. I don't know. But, in the end, what ended up happening is, this progressed, and that was the verbal. I feel like I remember a pitchfork. I feel like I might have thrown a pitchfork at him right after this against the wall thing. And I don't, I think that when you fight back, when we fight back, and I don't, people out there that have actually studied, domestic violence, from my perspective, when you fight back, it gets worse. You should, if you're in a dangerous situation, sometimes staying quiet and leaving in the dead of the night, as an analogy, is what you have to do, because you don't realize how strong men are. And I didn't realize how strong men were until this. But over time, we had some circumstances where we would get in an argument, and I remember the next time he touched me, he shook me. And the moment, he shook me, he knew he had done wrong, and he grabbed me and he hugged me. And then I tried to push him away, and he would beat me in the back while he was hugging me. And I remember, and then he would cry and he would cry because he felt so bad, but he had all this rage, and he would do it again. And it was like this constant, mental battle that he was having. And when he would cry, I would console, and it was like this terrible, vicious cycle. And unfortunately, it kept getting worse. And, I told you this the other day, but, at one point I took off running down the street, and he chased me down. He threw me on the concrete, and then he cried. And I think he cried at that one. I can't remember. There were times that he would get mad, and he would stay mad for a little bit longer periods of time. And then he would cry later. And or he would ask for forgiveness later. And, I think the end game one for us was, I can't remember the circumstance and the situation, but I was in his house. His family wasn't home. And he was trying to apologize. Mm-hmm. I'm guessing he was probably trying to apologize for what had happened previously. Some shaking or some hitting of some kind, or name calling, I'm sure, or something. And I was standing there and I looked at the door, the back door, which he had already locked. I watched him lock it. And I took off towards the front door, and he grabbed me down, and I fell, and he had his hands on my ankle, and he crawled on top of me and basically said, I can't go anywhere, or I'm not going anywhere. And I remember in that moment, up until that point, I had always kind of thought I could fight back, and that you can be strong enough. Like, you don't realize how much stronger a man is than you. And I'm a trainer, and I never, like, now I can really appreciate it. I can see it every day, but you don't see that every day. And you have no idea how much stronger their body weight in and of itself is over you. And it just is. And I think at that moment was when it became a little bit more scary for me, and when it became a little bit more real. And, he got up, he locked the front door, and we talked, and somehow I ended up still there. And then there was this final night where we got in some fight about something, and his family wasn't home. And I can't remember how we ended up fighting, but I tried to run out, and he grabbed me down again, and I hit the floor. And somewhere along this, we got up, and I think I slapped him, and he grabbed me, and this is the most violent I think he had gotten, and he threw me on the bed, and he was straddling me, and he was calling me names, and I was very mad. And I
can imagine.
Yeah. And I said, you're not a man. You're not a man because you can hold a woman down. You're nothing but a pussy. And I spit in his face. And he had my hands pinned, and he just slapped me and backhanded me and slapped me and then backhanded me. And then I don't remember too much after that. I know I hit him back. At some point, though, his family came home, and it was like I went home, and we never talked about that. Like, we never talked about that experience, to my knowledge. I don't remember ever talking about that. Roll around a couple of weeks later, we are not really talking anymore. We're not dating anymore. Like, it's ended. We are, for the most part, ended. I mean, we were still like texting every now and again, but I think we had terms that it was over.
Hey, Jessie, let me ask you a question real quick. Yeah. I didn't want to interrupt your story there. Yeah. But before we go any further, you talked about a lot that the pattern was he would either slap you, hit you, say something to you, verbal abuse, but then immediately apologize and say he was sorry. As an adult now and probably dealing with other ladies, how common is that in an abusive domestic violence situation?
So common. In fact, I ended up pressing charges, which we'll talk about in a little bit. I only pressed charges. I actually lied for him whenever the police came to me about this, because somebody reported the bruises. When that happened, I lied for him for days, and they made me sit in the police office at school, and they would hound me, and they would batter me with questions, and I would lie, and then they would catch me in a lie because I had said one thing, then I changed the story later, and I was always blaming myself. Like, I tried to jump out of a moving vehicle, and he grabbed me. That's not true at all. He grabbed me, and that's why I had handprints on my arms. Like, there were other stories about I would make these lies up and these stories up, and whenever it finally came full circle for me, Tim, is when they handed me a pamphlet, and they said, he probably did this to somebody else, and they didn't say anything, and they didn't do anything, and that's why it's happening to you. And if you don't say something and you don't do something, it's going to happen to somebody else.
Right.
And that was like the ultimate decision maker. And it was so true, because I looked at this pamphlet, And it talked about how it starts with like this verbal, like this possessiveness, and then this verbal abuse. And then it goes to the actual abuse. And it's a chronological circle. And then the apologies and all of these things. And it was like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I'm here. I can't believe I'm in this place. I can't believe this is me.
Did you feel like you were looking at a blueprint of your relationship right in front of you?
Right in front of me. And the biggest thing was we had only been together about 9 months.
Wow.
The idea, and one of the things that I'm pretty sure either one of my family members or the police officer, Officer Hamlin, said to me was, you've only been together a short time. If it's gotten this far already, where will it be a year from now?
One thing I wanted to bring up, when we had talked about your story, we did a phone call a week ago or so, you talked about what a big hero the officer was to you. And what did that mean to you that someone recognized something and stood up for you when you really couldn't stand up for yourself? What was that like for you?
Oh my gosh, I will. I should really reach back out to him because, he wouldn't stop, man. He could have easily given himself a break and just let me go because I lied and I lied and I lied. And I kept saying that none of those things were happening. And he could have just let it go because I was not giving up. And I can't tell you how many days I had to sit in that office. It felt like a century, but he just kept pushing and he kept pushing. And if it weren't for him, I don't know if I would have had the courage to do what I did and to actually press charges. And once I did, once it was time and I had to press charges, the officers called my parents. And up until that point, my parents didn't know. Nobody knew this was happening. Nobody. I think one of my best friends at the time, Kara, no, she didn't know because I told her after. It was after. So yeah, I think at that point, nobody knew what was going on. My sister was the most aware.
Okay.
But she didn't know that abuse was happening. She just knew she did not like him. She didn't like how he was pulling us away. And, I think for me to have that person first of all, I should say that somebody else I had a big brother, big sister. I was a part of that program when I was younger. Mm-hmm. And that person, because I didn't have very many friends, she was that person for me. And I hadn't talked to her in years. And she was the one that saw the bruises on my face when I was doing my school ID. And, she's the one that reported me. And so, 2 weeks after, or, I think it was probably 10 days after it happened, I had bruises still on my face. And then I roll around to, going to school. And day one of school is when Officer Hamlin brought me in. And man, he just wouldn't give up. Now, I confided in Jennifer that this had happened. And she had the courage to step in and say, I'm going to tell Officer Hamlin. And Officer Hamlin had the courage to just stay on me until I confessed it to him. And took charge. And I think that's a defining moment for my life. I think I take a lot of pride in that I finally did something. Mm-hmm. If anything, I hope it helped him to see that both of our relationship was not healthy on any stretch of the imagination.
Right.
And I think he was probably sick. And I know I was sick. I was incredibly depressed. I had a lot of stuff going on, which is why I ended up allowing any of that to happen. And I think so many people don't realize how important their role could be in somebody else's life.
Right.
They realize all it takes is one word. All it takes is you to say one thing and you might change everything for somebody.
Right.
I don't know where I would be if that hadn't happened in my life. I wouldn't take it back either. I think I learned so much from it and I want to be able to pour into other people that are going through it. And I actually think that this guy, I hope that me taking the steps that I did, I hope he knows it's never okay for the woman to hit a man and it's not okay for a man to hit a woman, ever. That's
absolutely.
Never. And I hope that he understands that on both of our ends, that was never good, but he has to understand he needs help for that rage. And I hope he realizes that. And I think if anything, at the end of the day, at least it went on his record for a hot second and it won't happen again. Or if it does happen again, they will know there's a history and,
right.
And he can stop it or he can get help or somebody can get help. Or at a very minimum, somebody does the research and if it happens to them, they're able to press charges and he goes away until he can't do it anymore.
Well, it goes back to what you said early on. If you see something, say something. Show up in somebody's life right there like that officer did or your friend did for you. You did say a couple things. I want to step out just for the audience right now. Can you give a couple signs to somebody who you might see somebody in an abusive relationship?
Yes.
Because, I mean, you were hiding it from everybody. Everybody. I mean, these are the closest people in your world, and they have no clue. Can you give me a few signs?
Well, if you ask them, I bet you they would tell you that they felt like they did know something was up, but they didn't, I know that they said that, they think that our relationship's not right, but ultimately the signs that you can look for to determine if there's something broken is that they start to withdraw. They pull away from the things that they used to love, and they're spending that time doing something that is unimportant, but with the other person.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to give you an example. You normally used to love to work out, and now all of a sudden you spend your nights and your days and every moment that you're off watching TV with this other person.
Mm-hmm.
Just watching TV. It's not important. You used to have this workout group, let's just say. Now you don't, and you just spend your time. Okay, well, that you can understand. Some people don't like to exercise, okay? You stop coming to family dinners, okay?
Mm-hmm.
That's another telltale sign. You are never, ever, ever available, ever, to hang out with your friends. These are all signs that something in this relationship isn't right. That doesn't mean it's domestic violence.
Mm-hmm.
It just means something isn't right. And if you see it, you got to say it. And then I think something like over time that if you notice this, you've got to say something. If you start to notice them being depressed and being down,
Mm-hmm.
you've got to know that they're in a place in their world where that should be the best time of their life. They should want to bring this person around their friends and their family. And if they don't want to do that, there is something broken here. There's something broken. And I can't say what that is. It could be the other person's broken. I don't know. But ultimately, something's broken, and it could be that they're depressed. It could be they're having mental illness. It could be that they're in a domestic violence situation, and it's just starting out, and they don't know how to get out of it.
Right.
At some point, you just have to realize this is somebody's personality. If you know them well enough, you know their personality. And if it deviates dramatically in a short amount of time to this other place, you can guarantee there's something else happening. And it could be mental illness, and you should say something. It could be domestic violence, and you should say something.
Well, those tips that you gave us about things to look for, see something, say something, show up in their life when they can't do it for themselves. So you pressed charges on him. Your life evolved a little bit more. I'm assuming you graduated from high school. What kind of happened after that?
Yeah. So I think from there, I graduated from high school, and I graduated early from high school. I wanted out as fast as I could. I was still very depressed during that time period, and then something kind of happened in my world, and I decided that I needed to get healthy and I needed to get fit, and I hired a personal trainer, and I worked out with them for a few years, and I wasn't getting the results I should say. Yeah, I guess it was about 2 years I worked out with them, and I wasn't really getting the results that I was looking for, and I really couldn't figure out what that was. And I stayed with this trainer, and he was a little bit of maybe a negative affirmation kind of trainer. And there's different types of trainers. I'm a trainer now, so I can say that. And some people are motivated by that, and some people aren't. And I followed this path, and I was in college at this point, and I'm working out with this trainer, and I'm not really seeing the results that I'm looking for. And I ended up, not working out that trainer anymore, and kind of I stopped working out altogether. And I had a circumstance happen, and it's wild, and this is a whole nother, podcast, but the trainer that I had, I know.
As you can see, we're going to have about 10 podcasts with Jessie. She'll be back.
A lot of things. One of those that trainer that I had, he died of a heart aneurysm while working out at the gym. Which, by the way, during this process, I actually was working at the gym. And when this happened, I wasn't at the gym that day, but I worked there at the gym for him, and he owned the gym. And when he died, it was just a shock to everyone. But it was a horrible experience for everyone. But what was really interesting is that there was this other guy that I didn't even really know, and he had a heart of gold, and I'd seen him in the gym 100 times. His name was Glenn Johnson, and Glenn became my light, and he became my guide, and he changed my life more than he will ever be able to know, unfortunately. And so he kind of took me under his wing. I couldn't afford as a college student to pay for training. And so he let me work out with him either just one, like with him when he was working out, or he let me work out in his small group of people that are women that he trained. And he used positive reinforcement, and he would tell me that I'm doing so good. And he would, just give me a lot of affirmation. He would text me and tell me I needed to be at the gym at 8:00 in the morning. Like he would give me these things that nobody had ever given me before, and just attention in general. And over this time period, he helped me learn how to eat, and he poured himself into me. And one day I looked in the mirror and I realized that I'm finally beautiful. I finally feel comfortable in my body. I finally feel like I'm healthy. And I had gotten my cholesterol I had a cholesterol level of 273 when I was 13, and it had raised all the way back up when I was in my 20s. And, Glenn really helped me to fix that. And, this whole time he did it with such a humble and, humble heart, and he did it for free, and he became my best friend. And he guided me through so much. And I remember I graduated top of my class in college, and he was so proud of me. And I remember thinking, like, that's such a cool thing to have somebody that proud of you that, he had no reason to ask me to work out with him. It was, money out of his pocket.
Right.
He did. And, his wife is absolutely amazing. And, this whole time I'm sitting here thinking, like, how did I get adopted into this amazing family? And I get a job, and I'm in this corporate world, and only 7% of my graduating class got a job out of school, and I did, and I was so proud, and I was still so unhappy because my job was not rewarding and it was not impactful.
Right.
So he just poured so much into me. I couldn't believe that I had somebody in my life like that. And I think after graduating top of my class and going into this corporate job, I realized that life is really short, and I wanted to do something great with my life, and I felt like I wasn't. And Glenn would meet with me for lunch, take even more time out of his day to meet with me for lunch, and just let me sometimes cry and just tell him how unhappy I was at this job, but I felt like I needed to be there and I didn't know how to get out of it.
Right.
And he would tell me, you should look at becoming a trainer. And he started training me, and so he trained me every morning. Started training me in the mornings and then telling me what body part I was using. And I didn't know what I was doing the whole year, all those years. I was just moving, and I was getting in shape, and it was great, but I didn't know what I was doing. Well, let's skip forward just a little bit. About 9 months later, or 3 months later, really, I met the man of my dreams. And it was so interesting when I introduced him to Glenn. Glenn was like, okay, I like this one. Because he got to know a lot of my friends. And I was like, I like this one. And it's now my husband. And, me and Kevin went on the lake with Glenn, and we got to spend time with him. And, he was just one of those giving guys. He bought a boat to teach himself how to swim, and then surprise his family with this boat. And when this kind of all, was going down, he was so proud of himself because he taught himself to swim. And that was on a Saturday. We went on the boat on a Saturday in the summer, and I think it was June. Yeah, June. And then on Tuesday, he went out with his wife, and he didn't come back. He drowned, and I lost my best friend, and I lost the person that had made arguably one of the biggest impacts on my life, second to my mom. And
I'm so sorry to hear that.
it's okay.
Mm.
And it's okay because because of that, I knew I had to do something great with my life. And I walked into my job, my corporate job, and I quit my job cold turkey. And I didn't know what I was going to do, really. My boyfriend at the time was going through the process to become a CG trainer, a Camp Gladiator trainer. And what's crazy is that when this happened, Glenn's a competitor to Camp Gladiator, technically. And when this all happened, Camp Gladiator, because I was Kevin's girlfriend of 6 months, by the way, not long, Camp Gladiator said, you're a part of our family. And if Glenn meant that much to you, he means that much to us. And the founders from all the way in Austin, Texas, sent money trainers from Austin, Texas sent money. Campers from across the Metroplex sent money to his search and recovery and funeral fund that I created.
Mm-hmm.
And I was able to walk up to his wife the day after the funeral and hand her a check for $7,200. And
That's amazing.
Amazing. $5,000 of that came from Camp Gladiator trainers and campers and the founders. And to me, that was like God saying, this is your family now. Like,
Mm-hmm.
this is where you need to be. And it was all over from there for me. And I poured everything into Camp Gladiator, but my whole life into Camp Gladiator. Mm-hmm. And that's changed my life, now we'll talk more about that in a minute, but, I think that God does things in mysterious ways, and I don't think that's the only reason. I think there's so many things that Glenn got to do in his life, and he was taken away way too early, but I always believe that God has a bigger plan, and he knows what he's doing. And
absolutely.
Nicole, his wife, by the way, she's amazing, and she has a husband now and a baby, well, not a baby anymore, but, a kid.
Mm-hmm.
They have a daughter too. It was his adopted daughter. He married into the family, and so he wasn't his biological daughter, but it might as well have been. Glenn loved her so much. They're a tight family, and I get to watch where their life is now, and we all miss Glenn so much. But ultimately, I know he's looking down and he's proud. And Nicole, she'll tell me sometimes, she'll message me and tell me how proud Glenn would be of me, and it's pretty cool.
Well, Jessie, let me just say, this is a very emotional story, and you've been fighting through tears and smiles and laughs the whole podcast. And I say this to all of my people who are on my podcast is thank you for your strength. You guys don't get to see her sitting here, and she's telling the story. I can see her feeling it and like just reliving these things, and it's very hard. Doing this and coming out and giving all these, I say, dark, dirty secrets about yourself is not easy at all. You have to go to a real dark place again to relive that, to experience it. And Jessie's doing this for the greater good. She sees that this podcast has the potential to spread that message of hope over and over and over again. And she's willing to do that right here. And let me say also, I think everybody out there needs to be a Glenn.
Yeah.
Find somebody and pour into them for no other reason that you see potential. Not for monetary gain, not because you want to be popular, doing it just out of your goodness of your heart. Be the Glenn. And that's going to be our hashtag for this podcast, is be that Glenn. Be out there showing love in a practical way to people, invest in people, connect with people, and just love on them. And look what that did for Jessie. I mean, her life is forever changed because of a man named Glenn.
Yeah.
And I mean, and I can't be understated at all. So really, thank you for being strong and sharing that story about Glenn. And you talked about that you were wrapped up in this family of Camp Gladiator. What is Camp Gladiator? What is that all about?
Yeah, so we're an all-outdoor adult fitness program, and we started, 9 years ago, almost 10 years ago now. Really, we meet in parks and in parking lots, and we're a community of trainers that are out to impact our communities while working on a team together. Mm-hmm. We pour into each other, we share ideas, and we create a culture that is all about impacting lives, not just through fitness, mm-hmm. but all in all. And we pour that into each other. And, our mission is to impact as many lives as possible through fitness and putting people together, and our vision is to be absolutely everywhere that we can find people. We want to be in every state. We want to be in every city, because we believe that when you bind people together in a way that builds positivity, your lives will be changed unmatched, just like Glenn's was for me. What Glenn did that for me, and now I get to be a part of a company that wants to do that across the nation, and that is a cool thing.
That is an amazing feeling for sure. So Camp Gladiator, you guys are about working out, but it sounds like you guys are in the people business. It's all about the people. Mm-hmm. And I say this to a lot of people. If you invest in people, I don't care if it's in your business and everyday life, you win all day, every day. You can't go wrong with that. And it sounds like you've landed in an amazing opportunity with Camp Gladiator. I had a couple of final questions for you. And you've talked a great deal about being in this abusive relationship and how that really impacted your life through as a young adult, not really having any value and things like that. If someone is listening today and they are in an abusive relationship, what bit of advice or hope can you offer for them to not even necessarily get out, but to just day by day to offer them hope?
I think the bit of advice that I can give that I wish I would have known then is to find somebody that you can talk to, anybody. And it's got to be somebody that you can trust, but it's also got to be somebody that's got a different head on their shoulders than you. It can't be the same person. It can't be your sister, and it's sometimes got to be a counselor. And I recommend you do that because you can love somebody so much and still be in an abusive relationship, and you need somebody to help you get through that. I think, I'm a little bit biased because I did get out, but I got to say that if you can get out, like, you have no idea, the grass is so much greener. And if you just find the courage to just take a step, you're gonna be so glad you did. And I can't even believe I have the life that I have now. I'm so incredibly blessed. I have the best husband who never raises his voice, and just, he's absolutely amazing. And I have so much confidence, and I was so broken then, and I didn't even realize how every day he was breaking me, and he was making me feel less and less and less, to the point where I didn't feel like I had any value at all. And there is green grass on the other side, but it takes a lot of courage. You just got to say, I'm going to take it, and I'm going to take that courage, and I'm going to run, and I'm going to find that grass.
I think that is amazing advice. I mean, from a person who has gone through it, who has now come through on the other side through so many things. I mean, I think we scratched the surface of your life, of so many things that you went through from a young age to a young adult to a young woman to where you're at now. This is real proof of that things can change, that if someone invest in somebody, things can change, and that God's grace can do amazing things in your life. I'm sure you would say exactly the same thing.
100%.
I think you have an amazing story here, an amazing outreach. And if somebody wants to talk to you and confide in you and get answers from you, how can they connect with you, Jessie?
Yeah, so you can reach out to me on my Instagram account, JustFitJessie, #JustFitJessie too. You can do either one. And I'm happy to reach out to you back. I'm all about it. I want to pour into people. That's one of my goals, my path in life, is that I want to be able to be a light for other people. In fact, I wrote my own core mission statement, and my mission statement is to be a positive light and a light in everything that I do, from my work to my communications and the people I talk to and how I talk to people. I want every single thing I do to build positivity and to build light into their life. So please do reach out to me, JustFitJessie on Instagram. If you're not an Instagram person, that's okay. You can do Facebook. I'm Jessie Lane Richardson, Facebook / Jessie Lane Richardson, and it's Jessie IE, and Lane is LAYNE. So JESSIE LAYNE, and then Richardson, just like it sounds.
Well, to make it even simpler for people, I will put this in the show notes of the podcast. Wonderful. So it's easy, so people can just click right on it and get right in touch with you. I think your core mission statement, you really exude that. You're living that light. I see it from you. I hear it in your voice. And even prior to this, when we talked before, you're just high energy, you told me, I'm happy. I'm happy to be alive. I'm happy I can put my feet on the ground and go and work out today and make an impact on people's lives. So you're doing that every day. I can't tell you how much I appreciate you coming on the podcast today and sharing your story.
It's my joy. It is my joy. If I can help anybody, if it even reaches just one person, I am happy.
Well, you've already reached me, and that's one person. You're going to reach many, many people. And so bless you for being here. Thank you so much, and I hope you have a great day, Jessie. Thanks.
Thank you, Tim.
I really appreciated Jessie for coming on and sharing her story with us. Right now, if you're like me, you're sitting there in awe. The stuff that she went through from early on at a young age, all the different parts of stress and pain and suffering that she went through, and is still able to be standing today. That's God's grace. That is strength. That is having a vision for yourself when you couldn't early on. And I'm really blown away by the way she was able to, very emotionally and very raw, but be able to tell that story to us today and speak to you. How did you feel when you heard those things? It's not easy to listen to. I know parts of it are tough to hear. I was actually looking up some statistics about domestic violence that really kind of stuck out to me. It says on average, nearly 20 people per minute are physically abused by an intimate partner in the United States. During 1 year, this equates to more than 10 million women and men. That is one person too many. And I'm ashamed that this happens and goes on, but hopefully talking about it today, this will offer some hope and encouragement for somebody. And something else that Jessie said in her story that stood out to me, and I was reading this other stat that says only 34% of people who are injured by an intimate partner receives medical care for their injuries. And it reminded me of her story when she talked about that nobody knew what was going on in her life, that the bruises, the marks on her body, the injuries she sustained from those violent attacks were made as excuses of things that happened everywhere else, where I was getting pulled out of a car and things like that and hiding all of that. And that's why I think a lot of abuse goes unnoticed, because no one is getting that care and no one is getting that medical attention that they need for those injuries and those emotional scars. And that's why we wanted to talk about it today on the podcast. Like I said at the very beginning, it is a very raw and powerful story, but it is a real story, and it's a story that needs to be told. And we could not thank Jessie enough for being the strong person to tell that story. Like in Jessie's story, when you're at the hands of someone who's abusive, you really start to devalue yourself. You start to believe the lies that person's telling you. And sadly enough, you start to feel comfortable by the lies, because with the lies, everything's a little bit easier. Where if the lie is that I'm no good, I can never achieve anything, I'll never be good at anything, no one will ever love me, then you can start to use those lies as a crutch in your life. Like, why even try to put myself out there? No one cares about me anyhow. Why even try to go after that job? I really don't have any good qualities. Why would I want anyone ever want me? And when we start to believe those lies as that crutch, it really holds us back. And so what I'm challenging you guys to do, if you're out there and you're believing some of these lies that have been told to you, they're not true. You do have value. And it's true. Some of these things that you're going to have to do in your life are going to be a little bit hard. Like I said, the lies are easy. The lies that we carry are easy sometimes as a crutch. But I want you guys to focus on something that's a little bit hard, that's actually true, and that actually can be done. And I know if you're in that dark spot right now and you don't see it, you don't feel it, that you can get there, but you can. Is it going to be a little hard? Yes. It's going to be a little hard to get past that and to believe the new things about yourself, to believe the things that are true, to believe the things that are possible, to see that future and have that hope outside of that relationship, outside of those lies. And I really, really want that for you. So focus on positivity, focus on the future for yourself. And I'm focusing on all that for all of you guys. And don't forget to be a Glenn. We talked about Glenn in the show. Show up in somebody's life. Be a Glenn. If you've ever had a Glenn in your life, you know what it's like to have someone unknowingly pour into you for no reason at all, no personal gain, but just the pure joy of seeing someone succeed. And if you've ever had a Glenn pour into you, we want to hear about it. We want to celebrate that person. We want to celebrate the Glenns out there, the Glenns who are really just showing up in people's lives and making a difference. So if you have a Glenn story, make it a comment on our Facebook group or on Instagram and share that. And we want to talk about it on the podcast. We want to celebrate those people who are out there, giving positivity in the world and speaking truth into people. How amazing is that? So don't forget, be a Glenn to somebody else. And if someone's been a Glenn to you, let us know. We want to celebrate him or her. We've talked about it a lot on the podcast, about subscribing and leaving a written review, how important that is to get the message of hope out. And again, I will ask you guys, continue to share the podcast. It's the greatest compliment to myself. It's the greatest compliment to Jessie and Katie Ersta and Bonnie and everybody that I've had on the podcast, to share their stories so they don't just die here in an audio file in someone's computer. Get it out there so that message of hope is that revolution for people, and they feel it and they have that extra step to go on, just to push a little bit further when there's that dark light, so they see that bright light at the end of the tunnel. Be that bright light for somebody today. If you want to leave your story and don't want to be on the podcast, check it out at unwrittenlifepodcast.com. you can do that there, and we will be happy to share your story on the show. Also, you can email me at tim@unwrittenlifepodcast.com. I'm on Instagram at the Unwritten Life Podcast, and also our Facebook group where the conversation is happening is the Unwritten Life Podcast. Just ask to join, and you are in. You are part of the family. I can't tell you how much I appreciate you all listening, how much it means to me every week to see people downloading the show and then sharing it and talking about it and encouraging the people that have been on the show and telling them how much it means to them. That just really touches my heart, and it really speaks to my commitment to the show and to the reason I wanted to do this in the first place. So we've come to the end of another episode, but this is not the end of your life, not the end of your journey at all. Remember, you matter. You can make a difference, and your story is still unwritten.